Lust, love, life. Can you have it all? Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I hope you're having a good day today. It's always a good day for me when I get to talk to independent filmmakers about their new films coming out on video on demand, having been at film festivals and loved by audiences there. Yes, film festivals are coming back. I'm excited to talk to you today about a film called Lust, Love, Life. The directors are here. Benjamin Feuer and Stephanie Sellars are here to talk about the film. How you doing? How's everybody doing?
We're doing great. Thanks so much for having us.
I'm great too. Thank you for having us. I realized I misread the title. It's actually Lust, Life, Love. I misread it. Yeah, I misread it on the screen.
Oh, okay. Cool. Wait, did I get it wrong?
Yeah.
Well, no. You know what I can do? We're gonna just change it right now.
Okay.
I love the intro.
So it's Love, Lust, Life.
I don't know why I
life, love.
For a moment there, I just misread it.
Wait. So what is it?
It's Lust, Life, Love.
Yeah.
Lust, Life, Love. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think I copied that right from a press release. So I don't know how I got that wrong.
It's the
Look at that.
This was wrong. Oh no.
But can I say something about this though? Because we actually debated this title, and it was like a major topic of conversation. And this was like one of the things we talked about was like, oh, is it too many like similar words in a row? People are going to get reversed as a natural thing. But the reason, originally the film was called Lust, Life, and we switched it to Lust, Life, Love because when we saw the product, I think, Stephanie, you'll agree that when we saw the film and we saw how the film was playing kind of the message, it seemed like love was like a really important component of it and of the relationships. And it didn't make sense for it to be 100% focused on lust. I mean, that's not a part of the film, but it's really the interplay between those three things that kind of makes the film. So it's almost like, I think Lust, I thought Lust, Life, Love sounded the best, but like the ordering is almost like arbitrary, right? Because it's like there are all these priorities and you have to figure them out. It's figure out like which one is going to rule on a given day.
Well, I'm glad we got it right. Lust, Life, Love. And really, love is a big part of this. Stephanie, just to tell the audience about this, you play a character who is a sex columnist who is navigating the polyamorous lifestyle. And that's something that when I was newly divorced and had to date again, the thing that I noticed was very popular on things was on dating profiles was poly, and I did not know what it was. Can you explain that? And also, like, I feel like the character in the film is very similar to you. Can you talk about that, and then also talk a little bit about polyamory?
Sure. Sure. Well, polyamory is a word meaning literally many loves. It's actually a hybrid of Greek and Latin, poly for many and amory for love. And it means consensual, multiple romantic relationships, and usually, sexual as well. And so it's an alternative to cheating, which a lot of people who claim to be monogamous do anyway. So I think it's a way more honest way to live in relationships with people. So yeah, the story came about from my experience with polyamory, and I was actually a sex columnist for a New York City alt-weekly newspaper called the New York Press, which went out of print in 2008, I think. And I wrote about my experiences with relationships and sexual exploration. So that was the inspiration for the story, but the story has evolved a lot, from my experience to becoming even though Veronica is similar to me, she has become her own woman, and diverged from my actual life.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the movie opens with a kind of playful threesome, right? It's playfully done, and I will say, and also traverses things from sex parties or fetish events and whatnot. And what I find really interesting about it is that it doesn't feel exploitative. There's something about it where it's just like, yes, there is nudity. Yes, there are sex acts, not particularly graphic per se, right? It's not pornography, but it's also doesn't feel exploitative in a way where you see other types of films, you go, well, this is completely exploitative and in many cases unnecessary. I am a bit dismayed by the fact that I almost feel like modern Hollywood has become almost fearful of having sexiness or even romance in films. It's almost like they become sexless. Like I saw the recent James Bond film, and you used to have the Bond girl in the bikini and all that is gone. Is there like a weird sort of almost puritanical fear of sex in Hollywood? And then, with indie films, you don't see this kind of subject matter explored particularly often. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. Like, where are we? Like, just as the world is becoming more sophisticated with different types of and accepting of different types of sexuality, it's also being kind of suppressed when it comes to entertainment and not discussed in a particularly adult way, right? Like there used to be films like Last Tango in Paris, among other types of films that approach it in a very adult way, which I believe your film does. And it's almost like a flip of a romantic comedy, kind of showing, because there are kind of romantic comedy aspects to it, which I appreciated, but it doesn't fall into the cliches. Can you speak to that and like our culture now and like where things are? Because I feel the film really stands out because of that.
Yeah, that's a lot. I have so many thoughts. First of all, I think in sexless Hollywood, I think that has always been a part of Hollywood, like since the Haze Code of the 1930s. But I think the Me Too movement has also had an effect on that more recently. And I mean, this is just my theory about it. I actually haven't read anything, any evidence of that. But what do you think about that, Ben?
Gosh. I mean, Hollywood has had a historically troubled relationship to sex, but I would say in a larger sense to gender. And I think the troubled relationship that Hollywood had to gender and to gender roles spilled over into its relationship to sex. The Haze Code really grew out of the pressure from Catholic contingencies in the audience and Hollywood's desire to be the product for everyone. They wanted to be something that everybody could consume, and that meant family friendly. And in the speak of the 1930s, 1940s, that meant many subjects were taboo. But it's not as though audiences of the teens, 20s, 30s weren't interested in this material. It's not as though it didn't speak to their lives. It's just that the way Hollywood was prepared to deal with this material was not the way audiences were equipped to receive it. I mean, to me, the quintessential actress in this arena is Mae West. She has this tremendous career pre-Haze Code. She's on her way to being one of the biggest comedians in the world, a rival of anybody you care to name during the sound era. She's got this wonderful, unique style. She's, using people like Cary Grant as her toys as leading men, and she's a powerful businesswoman. Her persona involves commerce. It involves exchanging sex for money or sexual favors for money. It involves joking about her own appearance. It involves all these things that we think of as like, oh my God, this is so like now we're opening this up. It's like, no, this was open a long time before you. It just wasn't necessary. But what happened was the door closed on people like that. And it was closed by the studios, but with a big assist from conservative elements in the audience. And I think usually Hollywood tries to follow markets. So if Hollywood is, and I don't know if this is the case or not, I wouldn't be surprised if the big businesses that now own streaming companies are much more risk averse when it comes to things like this, because a scandal hurts them arguably more than it hurts, say, an independent studio like Fox, which could potentially benefit from Scandal.
Right.
But even so, even aside from all that, I think there's just a lot of risk aversion in the culture, and maybe that spills over into Hollywood. But they're just trying to teach people what they think the people want.
Yeah,
Well,
and I think in terms of like the exploitative nature of a lot of films that deal with sex, is the difference is when it's when it's a woman's story and it's written, directed, co-directed, as Ben and I did. That lens is it's coming from the inside, and that's how it's not exploitative. And I think that's how it worked with Mae West as well, because she was behind all of her work. She wrote plays. She had a play on Broadway about sex that was, I think, censored or shut down quickly. But anyway, she was ahead of her time.
For sure. I think you're right, Stephanie. Earlier you mentioned, Me Too. I think Me Too, created an overcorrection. I think with everything, Americans, I just feel like overcorrect with everything. If something's going to happen, it's just like let's do the extreme thing, and I think that's dishonest. I think that audiences, they like sex and sexuality. At the correct level. In a Marvel movie, you're going to get shirtless guys. That you're going to get, and I think that actually has led to Marvel movies having an appeal to women, because basically they're there for the beefcake. I mean, it's the Avengers movies are all Chippendale shows, right? Glorified, if you ask me.
And there's the skin tight costumes that the female characters wear too.
I mean, and I like that. And I think a lot of other men would agree. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But when you completely make something sexless or sort of romance free, which I thought that, not to nerd out too much, that last Star Wars trilogy was kind of like sort of romance-less and whatever. I think people forget the original Star Wars trilogy had a lot of romance, and it was very, I mean, like, look, it's, fairy tale. But it's disheartening to see that. And I've always enjoyed movies that, are adult films, and adult in the sense of sexuality being discussed in a mature way. There's not to go off topic a bit, but there's a really good documentary called Skin, A History of Nudity in the Movies, that talks about the Haze Code. It's a really great documentary. I think that you would appreciate it quite a bit. Skin, A History of, and I interviewed the filmmakers and Mr. Skin, who has like the largest database of nudity in the movies anywhere on the internet. But back to your film, I really appreciated the fact that it was so broke cliches, discussed things in a meaningful and mature way, didn't try to, sugarcoat the problems that come with a polyamorous lifestyle. You really leaned into the drama that can be created by these agreements. I think that's the way it's put in the film, are trying to navigate those and how those agreements can change and affect relationships. I thought it was just really well done. Aside from the fact that like you're a co-director on the film, and then you also are doing your own stunts, so to speak. You know what I mean? I mean, yes, you are naked in the film, and I would say that any good actor would say that whether they have clothes on or not, they're bearing their soul. They're naked on camera, at least emotionally speaking. And I felt you did a tremendous job of that in the movie. I'm curious how much of the film, because you spent 5 years working on the script, how much of the film was based on personal experience and whatnot. You kind of play a version of yourself in the story. So there was an honesty to the film that I felt that was very, very authentic and came across. So tell me about translating your personal experiences into a film that has now traveled the festival circuit and out on VOD.
Yeah. Well, the primary relationship in the film, the relationship between Veronica and Daniel, is inspired by my relationship with my husband, and like how our relationship was more in the beginning of our relationship, like many years ago, and which was actually also years before we made the movie. So, you know, there was some distance between it, and so it allowed for, you know, we took a lot of liberties. And then, you know, the other characters were, the Maya character was a compilation of a few women that I had, you know, friendship or a lover relationship with. And the other two lover characters, Joanne and Pedro, they were also kind of compilations of a few different people in my life. And yeah, and my family, Veronica's family, is very conservative, and you know, mine is as well. But I took that up a notch. I took that up like many notches for the film, and I have cats, and Veronica's cat in the film is my cat. Yeah, and so we shot. Veronica's apartment was actually my apartment in New York City. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap.
How was that to see like aspects of your life, and that I'm sure your husband was fine with everything in the film because your current husband.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but were there any issues with that at all?
Yeah, maybe just in the earlier stages of working through the script and you know, figuring out the story and sharing it with him. And sometimes he was like, oh, I'm too close to that to like give feedback. Like that's almost verbatim. And but you know, ultimately he embraced everything. And there are a few scenes in the film that are still kind of like, wow, that's exactly what happened. But that's like the, you know, very few scenes. Most of it is not like that. Yeah, and my parents actually watched the film, which I was surprised. I warned them. I gave them a lot of warning. I was like, I don't expect you to watch it. So I was really surprised when they did. And they said, you know, what helped them was watching it as if they were not watching me, they were watching a character. And they didn't seem offended by how the family was portrayed. So I don't actually know what they thought about that, but they didn't bring it up.
Well, I feel that the film is very honest, and I think it's also it's a portrait of sort of like what's happening, like as I think types of relationships are you know, evolving, so to speak. You read so many articles these days about how dating is broken. I think most of that is due to apps and whatnot. I think apps have kind of created unfulfilled expectations about you know, where a relationship can go. And I feel like what your film does so well is it shows here's other options, right? And here's a way of being brutally honest. And I don't think that's easy for a lot of people. I'm really curious because you played a lot of festivals. What were reactions from audiences? What kind of questions did they ask? And how did they respond? How did they respond to the film?
Well, there were really only 2 live screenings, unfortunately, due to
COVID.
Oh, right. Okay.
The first 3 festivals were.
But we also had some advance where we showed it. Like there was the big screening where we actually invited the poly community in New York. That was actually maybe my personal favorite. But
that was a pre-screening, and we ended up doing some re-editing after that. But even so, the audience loved it, and then the last screening in San Diego at Film Out San Diego in September, there was a Q&A, and there were some really interesting questions. There's actually a polyamorous triad in the audience, and one woman said she felt really uncomfortable, like the film made her feel uncomfortable, but it wasn't a bad thing. So I was like, great, I did my job. Like I made someone uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that there was an interesting divide I don't know. I'm not an insider in the poly community, and that was part of the role that I brought, I think, to the project. Also, was very much being an outsider for the community, so I could kind of provide that voice. But I thought that it was interesting as we got to the later stages of editing and screening the film that it was I think it became clear to us as a filmmaking team that the community that was represented in this film, it was really going to speak to them. And then there was another group of people out there who they're just not comfortable with being reminded that this lifestyle exists. And I think the reason for that is extremely interesting. And I don't know why, but it's something I'd be interested to know. But there are people who just don't like the idea that there are groups of people out there practicing actively polyamorous lifestyles with each other collectively, just in the way that it used to make people uncomfortable when you discussed, homosexuality or open displays of love between men, or and some people are still made uncomfortable by thinking too hard about that kind of thing. So I think we encountered some of that, actually.
Interesting. I'm curious. You mentioned that it played at Out San Diego, so I guess I don't think of your film as a queer film per se, but I can see that there's overlap with the queer community, and I'm curious what their thoughts were.
They loved it, and like one of their sponsors was the American Institute of Bisexuality, and they loved this film. And I think it is queer because the protagonist is bisexual, and that's a huge part of her identity. And then there are some other bisexual characters in there, and then Daniel has like a queer experience with a man, and it's a little debatable whether polyamory is queer or not. I've heard different thoughts about that. That it is like queer in terms of relationship style, but there are a lot of people who identify as heterosexual who are polyamorous. So it's an interesting question. But yeah, it was a big hit at Film Out San Diego, and the programmers loved it. They love the diversity of the queer experience.
Well, it's a film that I would encourage everyone to see now. It is. I just think it shows that it's possible to make a film that is both sexy and smart and respectful of the subject matter. I think that the way that sex tends to be portrayed, whether it even be an indie film or in Hollywood, is in a way that's meant to be like titillating or exploitative, but not just because sex is a part of our lives, right? Like everyone's life, hopefully, if you're an adult and in a healthy relationship, and I really appreciate this movie. Great, excellent. Yeah, thanks for coming on the Film Threat podcast, and I really wish you luck with the film. It's fantastic and awesome.
Yeah, and so October 12th, the film will be available on a number of platforms, but you could look on the 1091 Pictures website, as well as follow Less Life Love on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Less Life Love Movie, and at LL Film on Twitter. So.
Great. I'm glad we got it right. Less Life Love.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie and Benjamin. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.